Welcome to our History Channel, History Too Real for the Westerns. Tonight, the story of a battle on a hill in the middle of nowhere that changed the course of the American West. Join us for Texas Rangers versus Comanche Warriors in the Battle of Walker's Creek, San Antonio, June 1st, 1844. In what may have been the most dangerous territory in the world, a small group of 15 Texas Rangers rode northwest, leaving the relative safety of the city on a mission to kill or capture the Comanche chief Yellow Wolf and his band of warriors. The entire area had been awash in fire and blood for weeks, as the Comanche, the vaunted and venerable lords of the southern plains, had been wreaking death and destruction on anyone they saw as encroaching on their territory or who presented an easy and valuable target to both plunder and leave, as a mangled reminder that Texas belonged to the Comanche. This group of veteran rangers was out to put a stop to that raiding, but to many an outside observer from the east, it might be difficult, at least from a distance, to distinguish this band of men headed through the rolling timber and sprawling meadows of the Texas Hill Country on that stiflingly hot day from the Comanche Warriors or Mexican banditos they were so often on the trail of. They rode American quarter horses, a New World breed renowned for their speed over short distances, with Spanish-style bridles and saddles. They were not adorned in anything resembling a military uniform, nor were many of their beards or haircuts up to military regulation. They wore no insignia, flew no flag, and carried only small rations of cornmeal and coffee, dried meat, and tobacco. Some wore wide-brimmed hats and sarapes, others buckskin leggings, others moccasins and fringed buckskin shirts, while still others wore cotton pants and coonskin hats. They were mostly between the ages of 18 and 35, from all manner of backgrounds, but they had one thing in common. They had all come to Texas, and they had all become rangers for the same reason. Because they did not want to farm, they did not want to open saloons or mercantile stores, nor did they want anything to do with the big cities or civilized life. They had become rangers because they wanted to fight. They were, to say the least, a dangerous bunch of men. They were armed with single-shot rifles, tomahawks, Bowie knives, and new to this battlefield, multiple-shot Walker Colt revolvers, which enabled them to fire off 5 rounds in succession before having to reload. This could spell life or death on the Texas frontier, especially against the Comanche. The stakes were high, danger was everywhere, and violence was both dreadful and plentiful. The difference between victory and being tortured to death was often decided in moments, and only men with ice in their veins and a capacity to wreak violence on another at any place out here, in the lands beyond San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas, in the lands where the Comanche reigned. The Rangers were some of the few who could stay alive and even win in this unforgiving but bountiful land, whose timbered hills gave way to endless prairies, whose peaceful streams and ubiquitous wildflowers lay in stark contrast to the vast quantities of blood that soaked into its chalky, parched caliche dust. Here there was nowhere to run. Here there was nowhere to hide. A small group of rangers that day rode under the command of a diminutive, high-voiced 27-year-old. He had boyish features and an unassuming demeanor, but was feared and respected by friends and foe alike. He had dark hair, and what stood out most were his dark, cool, killer eyes. You can look at his picture today, and you will see a man whose eyes convey all these years later that he is not afraid. Even the Comanche, who disdained their enemies, yes, but disdained cowardice more, admired him. They said he was keep brave and had no fear. They called him Bravo too much, Captain Yak or Captain Jack. When asked to describe Hayes, a close friend and Indian guide would say that we would follow him into hell, but he would ride into hell all by himself. His name was Captain John Coffee Hayes. He had been born into a vaunted military family in 1817 in Little Cedar Lake, Tennessee. His father had served under Andrew Jackson, and he was named after Jackson's famous aide, John Coffee. He had made his way to Texas as a young man in search of fortune and adventure. He began as a land surveyor and soon joined up with the fledgling Rangers, who had just been stood up by the newly independent Texas as a means of policing and protecting the area. But, as fearsome as their reputation would become, at this point, the Rangers had only been marginally effective in curtailing the bloodshed and had taken horrendous losses. One old-time Ranger from the era estimated that about 50% were killed every year at the very beginning. They were underfunded, under-equipped, but made up for all of this with plenty of pure, distilled aggression. They had the heart to fight, but Jack Hayes, who had risen quickly in this violent and unforgiving world, gave them direction. And armed with their new revolvers, he believed he could finally take the fight to the feared and fearsome Comanche. On June 8th, after following the Pinta Trail about 60 miles northwest of San Antonio, just north of where today's farm to Market Road 1326 crosses the Guadalupe River in Kendall County, in an area known as Walker's Creek, the group stopped to gather some honey from a tree. Hayes had left a few men riding well behind them in order to see if they were being followed. Soon, those men rode into this small camp, saying that they had found Comanche horse tracks just behind the main party, and the Rangers were indeed being followed. At this point, Noah Cheery, the youngest of the bunch, was up in a tree when he spotted a group of Comanches in the distance, and alerted Hayes that, quote, "Jerusalem, Captain, yonder comes 1,000 Indians. That's the best impression I got." Hayes told his men to saddle up. It was go time. They rode out in pursuit of the Comanche, whose true numbers are estimated to have been anywhere from 40 to 200 warriors. First, they encountered a few young warriors who made a huge show of fleeing away from the advancing Texans, an old trick used to lure an attacking force deep into an ambush. The Rangers had seen this before and did not go for the bait. They came upon a group of warriors ranging from 20 to 40 Comanche, atop a small hill behind which ran a ravine, and then a larger hill behind that. From their positions, the Comanche taunted the Rangers in both English and Spanish to come fight and to charge. Doing so in any fight before this would have spelled almost certain death, as single-shot rifles and pistols would render the attackers completely defenseless after 1 or 2 shots. But now, with their new 5-shot blocker revolvers, Jack Hayes was going to change the way things were done. Before this, Rangers would ride into battle, dismount, and fight from cover, the way things had been done in the hills of the southeast. But that was no way to win against the highly mobile, highly aggressive mounted Comanche. Now, Hayes and his men would take the fight directly to the Comanche and seek to beat them at their own game. So, Hayes and his men, instead of charging directly at the Comanche as they were being dared to, charged around the bottom of the hill, flanking the Comanche and attacking them from behind. The fighting was up close and intense. Think like we were soldiers, but Old West, with Hayes yelling at his men to powder burn them, meaning to get so close before they fired on their targets that the gunpowder would scorch the Comanche's skin. Soon, the Comanche split their forces and wheeled around the Rangers in 2 groups. Here, breaking ranks for the Rangers would mean death. So, Hayes ordered his men to circle their horses, rump to rump, facing outward in order to absorb a series of Comanche attacks, via arrows that flew down like hundreds or thousands of deadly, stinging wasps, and 14-foot lances that were meant to kill buffalo, which could wreak havoc on the human torso. But after 15 minutes of this, The Rangers had killed dozens of the Comanche with their revolvers, which were able to lay down fire in a manner the Comanche had never seen before. After grievously wounding 4 Rangers and killing 1, Yellowknife called for his warriors to disperse. And now a running fight ensued over 2 miles of hilly country that lasted more than an hour. The Rangers would pursue. The Comanches would regroup and attack. The attack would be absorbed and repelled, and the Comanches would draw back further through the ravines and over the limestone hill. But after an hour of this, the Rangers were out of ammunition. Now 30 to 45 warriors attacked them viciously. Hayes calmly asked for anyone with any ammunition left, and one man stepped forward, Robert Gillespie. On the next attack, Hayes ordered Gillespie to shoot the chief, Yellowknife. They waited until the Comanche chief charged within 30 yards of them. Then Gillespie managed to shoot Yellowknife in the head and killed him with a single shot. For all their vaunted courage and cunning, the Comanche were very superstitious, and the fall of their chief meant that their puha, or medicine, which had served them so well in this fight, had somehow gone awry, and it was time to retreat. And so they did, howling in long wolf-like cries as they dashed northwards on the open prairie. When it was all said and done, 20 Comanche, Yellowknife included, had been killed, and around 30 had been wounded. One ranger, Samuel Walker, who would actually end up lending his name to the Walker Colt revolver as they refined this weapon, had him pinned to the ground with a lance. The Rangers made camp to care for their wounded, and 3 days later, 4 Comanche came riding over the horizon in search of their dead. The Rangers killed 3 of them. The West, specifically Texas, was a hard place. It was a world mired in gray and awash in violence, and it was shaped by hard people, whether that be Yellowknife and his band of Comanche, or Hayes and his Rangers. All existed in a brutal world, where mercy was weakness and might made right. But history in Texas could be marked by a time before and a time after Jack Hayes. He was the man who had shaped the Rangers, who had changed the way they fought, and helped shape the West. In 1847, he married Susan Calvert, and the couple would have 3 children together. But in 1849, Jack Hayes and the Hayes family would pack up and leave Texas for good. While he had certainly left his mark on the state, where there's a county named after him, just south of Travis County, just like West, southwest of Travis County, Hayes had been struck by gold fever, just like the rest of the country. Gold had been found at Sutter's Mill near Sacramento, and so the Hayes family and thousands of others went westward in search of gold in the state of California. But Texas, for all intents and purposes, still belonged to the Comanche, and the lords of the southern plains had not yet begun to fight. But that's another story for another time. Thank you for tuning into this episode of History at the OK Corral. If you like this topic and want to learn more, find even more podcasts about history, conspiracy, music, news, sports, and entertainment, check out the All Damn Night Podcast Network at alldamnnight.com. You can browse lots of free content or sign up for unlimited bonus content, which is hours and hours of more deep dives on the topics you know and love, all for only $5 a month. You get a week free trial if you sign up today. Satisfaction is guaranteed, or you can cancel anytime. Check it out today at alldamnnight.com.